I'm Jim.
And I'm Tracy.
And this is the Multipass Podcast. Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about a couple of different things. One thing that has struck me as I've looked out there on LinkedIn and Facebook and all these different things, I'm seeing a ton of people who are selling things. And, it's always struck me interesting. I know salesperson is an actual word, and I know that's an actual thing. I really do. But who wants to be sold things?
That's the American way.
Is it to be sold things, or is it to achieve things?
Buy.
Right? Well, yeah, that's the consumer way for sure, right? So, I think there's always going to be salespeople, but I think if you frame it in a certain way, it's more interesting. And I think that's where this direction that I'd like to go is headed, and that is really just about, I call it edutainment, but it's really just about education and opening up that portal, that gateway for people to be able to understand something, right? And I hate to offend myself and every other salesperson out there, but everybody does stuff that's like super boring, right? And so how do you get out of the super boring and get into the regular conversation that you need to be in to be able to get your education across? So education across. So the edutainment, right? So here's the thing. I think you really have to open up a gateway to be able to have the conversation. And here's the other thing. I don't think it happens through PowerPoint.
Right.
I know. But yet everybody uses PowerPoint, right? So what is PowerPoint? What's it for?
Well, it depends on what you're selling, right?
What are you selling with PowerPoint?
Usually graphs and, I don't know.
Okay, numbers.
Diagrams.
Numbers, right? So they need to see the numbers.
Colors of graphs.
Lovely colors. That's beautiful colors. Has 256 at least colors. Sometimes millions.
That's neat.
Millions. So can you do that without PowerPoint? And I think yes. So if you could illustrate those numbers, here's the thing. When you illustrate those numbers without PowerPoint, I swear to you all this is true. It actually comes across like you know what you're talking about when you can write those numbers.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So instead of having PowerPoint, a whiteboard might be what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe just you can use a projector, like there's all these cool apps on iPads now where you can project something and write to it. And maybe the combination, there might be some certain things your marketing department wants you to put out there, certain ways your template might work. Your boss or your boss's boss might not be a fan of this no PowerPoint, falderall. Word of the day
Falderall.
is falderall.
Oh, falderall.
Falderall, yes.
Falderall.
This falderall. It was almost balderdash, but I think falderall won out in the end.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So, you have to be able to present some of that stuff, but just get away from it. And by getting away from it, I think you get away from one of the main problems with PowerPoint, and that is that you're trying to sell something. You're not trying to sell something. You're trying to understand. This is really what it is. You're trying to understand what your client needs, and you're trying to understand if you can solve that need with what you have. And here's where you get into trouble. If you don't have what they need, you try and jam them into something that you do have. And that's where I think people get into trouble.
Go.
That's our dog. She's saying go to the dog. Oh, Bron, go away.
Go.
Thank you, buddy. We're going to leave that in there. We're not even going to edit that out. We're raw, people.
Okay, so that's good. I just, it's talking about in reference to what it is that you're selling, I guess, because everybody is being sold something every day. But again, it sounds like you're kind of getting back to that conversation that you're trying to have with people.
Right.
Regardless of what it is you're selling, you're
Right.
still trying to kind of just get back to the conversation.
Well, yeah, if you have something, I always say you want to earn somebody's business, right? So by having something they want and understanding what that fit is, you've earned that business, right? You haven't earned the business because you show up with stuff. And you haven't earned the business if you and 5 other sets of blue suits show up with stuff and they're going to pick the blue suit that has the lowest price, right? You haven't earned that business. You just showed up with your stuff, and they just picked the cheapest stuff, right? And that's how that works. So break that pattern. And how you break that pattern is by finding a methodology that allows you to understand what your client wants in depth, allows them to participate in the creation of that dialogue, right? So, and I tell my consultants this all the time: if you're doing most of the talking, you're doing it wrong, right?
Right.
Because if you're in that room and you want to understand that client, you have to listen to them. So they have to speak, and you have to shut up, and that's important. And then they'll tell you their language, they'll tell you their culture, they'll tell you all that stuff if you just listen. And then you can, if you have to go away, that's fine, or if you can do it right there, that's fine, but you'll be able to craft the things you have that fit that situation. And if you don't, you don't. And by the way, if you don't, that actually creates a ton more equity when you tell them you don't.
You don't know the answer, kind of
You don't have the solution.
Oh.
Favorite stories, one of my guys, he'll know who he is. You guys might know who he is too. But went out there, talked through a client's process, understood everything they needed, understood the things they had, and understood they had a really good portion of their process. He just told them, he said, that portion's great, don't change a thing. And they were shocked because they expected to be sold, right? But instead they, kept that, and it just so happened a year later they came back to this person and said, I really appreciate the fact that you didn't try and sell your thing into it. I can see Xander in the background. Was he wearing clothes? I don't know. I couldn't see him. I hope so. When you come back, he came back a year later, and they said, we really appreciate the fact that you were able to tell us the truth on that, and so now here's the business. So he got it anyway. That's just kind of the guy he was. But yeah, it's important. Earn the business by listening to the client, and don't sell anything. Educate them, and be educated on what that is. And I wish the words, I'm just going to tell you, I wish the word salesperson didn't even exist. That's why I always like consultant, because that's what you're doing, you're consulting.
What would you do with the poor death of a salesman?
Death of a consultant.
It would ruin, it's a whole other spin on Tennessee Williams.
I'm going to write a play called Death of the Consultant. It's going to be awesome.
Just saying. All
right, so that's that piece. That's the work piece of today's Multipass podcast.
Yeah, so the next thing I thought we'd talk about is change. And it's the one thing that everybody can count on, and something that we are constantly dealing with in our lives. I don't know if it's just us, or it probably is just us, but...
when you talk about change experts, I just think it's us. I just think it's us. Now, that might not be a badge of honor. That might be a badge of stupidity.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Yeah, for sure.
But nonetheless.
Yeah, definitely. So, and that brings up a good point, in that we constantly have a different, we think we're going one way, and we get hit with something that we weren't quite expecting, and we have to kind of reevaluate and, pick up your bootstraps. Is that?
Yep. Pick yourself up by your bootstraps.
Pick yourself up by your bootstraps
and go.
And keep going. And one thing I was thinking about in reference to change and stuff is, instead of being bogged down with the drama of it, when you're upset about something when it comes to you and you're not expecting it, and you just kind of wallow in that. Like,
say, for example, totally hypothetical, someone is going to buy your house. Let's go with one of those, right?
Sure.
Has a contract,
sure.
And then walks through.
Sure.
And their child.
No, they didn't have the contract yet. That's the thing that's so weird.
Walked through before, and their child had an allergic reaction.
Supposedly.
Because you had cats, right? Now.
But they wrote the contract. They signed the contract. They did all that even after that point.
Right.
You went under contract.
But they had an allergic reaction, and so they said, no, we can't live there now because there's no way you could possibly vacuum.
Or clean the tile floor.
Or whatever. So purely hypothetical.
Anyway, so yeah, something
So if
like
that change happened to you,
what you want to do and how to go about it, I think, is the best thing. Instead of wallowing in that, is finding the humor possibly out of it, and sort of the Pollyanna in me that kind of comes out.
she's really good
It
at
doesn't.
Pollyanna.
Well, actually, I kind of waver a little here and there.
She used to be the queen of the Glad game. It was called the Glad game.
That's true. Pollyanna. You know, if you know anything about Disney, you know that.
Most people don't.
Oh, that's sad.
I only know Pollyanna because of Tracy.
Well, that's okay. Anyway, so I just think it's, and with that, like how you said something like how you were saying, well, now that the fur has settled,
That's right.
that we can move on.
Just 1 minute. Xander, shut it!
Sorry.
Go on.
And I just think that it's something that as you get on in life and get, have a few years behind you and stuff, it's something to be able to do, to be able to learn to do, to adapt, to change.
So you're saying you want to be able to drive, this is my language.
Thank you.
So you want to be able to drive your cognitive pathways toward positive thinking.
Yes.
And instead of going, this sucks, they're stupid, seriously, a cat allergy breaks a house contract, you will go, well, if they're going to drop out anyway, clearly, if that little frail twig broke their back.
That's for sure.
And glad they did it now instead of wasting 2 weeks of our time.
Exactly.
Right? And it's going to sell. It's a great house, so we're not too worried about that. But yeah, but just that, you can fall into one of two paths.
Yeah.
Negative thinking
or positive.
Positive thinking. And here's what I always say. You can't do both at the same time. It's impossible to do. You can alternate, but that just gets weird.
Well, I think that's kind of a natural progression to probably at least to kind of get one place and then kind of go, well, I don't want to be there, and move out of that.
So. Yeah, so you kind of go there and then you learn to kind of come around to it.
Yeah.
Or it just happens and you feel kind of stunned, and so that happens a lot, right? So when the obstacle is in the road, the car screeches to a stop and you have a moment of freak out. I think that's pretty normal.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you?
Sure. Yeah.
And then you realize, oh, now I got to solve the obstacle.
And then you realize you hit a clown, and that's funny.
That is funny. Why is that funny? I don't know, but it is kind of funny. It's because I was pitching one of those clowns. You guys remember that weird face? It was 16 when like everybody was, not everybody. There were a few weirdos who dressed up as clowns and wanted to scare people.
Oh,
do you remember that? Do you guys remember that?
With Nora when she was here.
And so thinking of hitting one of those clowns is pretty funny.
Right. Sure.
Please don't hit clowns.
Yeah.
No.
Clowns are
don't
people
hit anybody.
too. Clowns are people too.
No violence.
Yeah. Anyway, so I just think that's something to kind of, think about in terms of, when you get hit with things that kind of you're not expecting, and how to possibly change your outlook on it and what to do.
Yeah.
And it was just so weird because when that happened to us just recently.
Yesterday.
And then I was like I picked up a magazine and started reading this article about finding the humor in life and how people are happier and live longer and are healthier when they have humor.
For sure.
So
yeah, I think it's
it
great.
Really kind of hit, I was like, oh.
That's perfect. And yeah, we did that yesterday too. So just kind of not to beat the dead horse, but when we were walking through and this news kind of hit you, I mean, I found myself kind of finding those kind of stunned points and trying to kind of mentally, on purpose, recover from them. Right? It's like you have to kind of put that stuff in your head immediately. And that's what the value, I think, of positive cognitive thinking does for you. And I say it specifically that way because they're devices you use, right? But even though they're devices you use, you tell yourself the positive version of the story, and you're doing that, you're constructing that reality.
Right.
It works. It totally works. Versus sitting in the negative, in which case you're just going to feel bad.
Yeah. Sure.
I love that. That's a great point.
Anyway, that was my 2 cents.
Yes.
Tracy's 2 cents.
this is our new format, by the way. We didn't tell you that to begin with because we didn't want to preload this. But our new format is that, we're going to take our expertise and bring it to the podcast. We're going to do it very naturally. We're just going to do it as we live it. Previously, we've done some editing, some different things, trying to make it all cool. But you know what? You can see a million cool podcasts. Instead, watch ours.
Cool. We're cool.
Yeah. But that's it for today. So we appreciate your attendance. And we'll try and do one every day now. So we've been trying. You know how podcasts get. Here's podcast. The first 3 are usually what people do, and then they fall off. We're not going to do that. This is 5 people. So we are serious about this. But we really think this work-life thing is very, very important. The more I read, the more I see that it all blends together. There is no work-life except in large corporations, and who wants to work in those? No offense, people who do, and I did for many, many years. But secretly admit to yourself you'd sometimes rather not. Okay, anyway. But that's for today. Any final words of wisdom?
Watch out for clowns.
And hit them. I'm Jim.
I'm Tracy.
And this is the Multipass Podcast.